When we have a problem in our marriage, we tend to think of marriage counseling as the thing that we should do if our marriage is in crisis, because that's what society has taught us. Full disclosure, I was trained as a marriage and family therapist, and parts of my training I loved, but there were parts of my training that were terrible. And ultimately, I switched to a master's in psychology because I really wasn't impressed by the field of therapy. I'm going to tell you more about that and what you need to look for if you're thinking about getting a counselor or therapist for your marriage. But before I do that, let me introduce myself. My name is Kimberly Holmes, and I'm the CEO of Marriage Helper. And at Marriage Helper, we have worked with thousands and thousands and thousands of couples. And we've existed over the past 20 years with our workshop that we've been doing for marriages in crisis that has a 77% success rate at saving marriages. We also have coaching and online courses that can help you with what you're looking to do in your marriage to save it, to fix it, or to grow it, or to recover it after a crisis has happened. We would love to be able to help you in any way possible. But through that work that we've done with thousands of couples, we have also been able to hear what other couples' experiences have been with counseling and therapy. I'm going to share some of that with you as well in this video. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you will get up-to-date, relevant videos that have to do with you and your marriage situation, whatever that might be. So why is it that when we have troubles in our marriage, we automatically think, let's go to counseling? Like I said before, it's what we kind of think of in society. It's the option that's there. And because it is the option that's there, we've heard about other people going to counseling. Sometimes we feel like that's what I need to do if my marriage is in crisis. But there's some things you need to know about counseling and how it works before you decide that this is what you want to do in order to save your marriage. And let me start with this. I'm not against counselors. I'm not against therapists. I believe that there are great counselors and therapists, but I don't believe that every situation that you encounter in your life needs counseling or therapy. Here's what you need to know. Number one, counseling is not perfect. There are going to be situations that you encounter in your life where a therapist or a counselor is going to be perfect for it. Things like if you are struggling with some mental things that you can't get past, OCD, bipolar disorder, anxiety and depression. There are items and things in life where you can encounter as a person that you are stuck with, that you can't get past, that there are valid points and reasons to have a counselor guide you through that. Now, here's the thing. There's a difference in counselors and therapists. Counselors are typically licensed professional counselors. They got an LPC degree, and they are more trained and focused on helping a person as an individual. The systems that and the modes of therapy that they work with are more to do with thinking of the individual as a person, as opposed to marriage and family therapist. MFT degrees and people who are trained in MFT are trained to think more in terms of systems. Instead of seeing a person as an individual, they see a person as a part of a larger system, a larger family unit. And that's the main difference between the modalities behind the two different types of counselors and therapists. Now, from there's modalities of therapy. There's emotionally focused therapy, there's behavioral therapy, there's narrative therapy. There's a ton of different types of therapies that counselors and therapists are trained in, and they all do have differences. Some of them are more focused in how does that make you feel, looking into the past, rewriting stories, and some of them are more focused on where do we go from here? How can we be more choosing things and items specifically for you to work on and move forward with them? They're all just different. And every counselor and therapist is going to have a different background and insight into the types of therapy they use. Now, some of them are going to be more trained in very specific therapies, but I can guarantee you that the majority of counselors and therapists use a combination of many different types of therapies. So it can be difficult in some sense because you don't know exactly. You listening to me, you're probably already overwhelmed. Well, how do I know which one I need to go to? How do I know which one I need for the purpose or situation or the thing that I'm going through in my life? I'll get to that in just a bit, but I'm just trying to set up the background to let you know that counseling is not perfect. It's not a magic pill. A lot of times I think people start into counseling thinking this is going to fix me or this is going to fix my situation. We'll go to this person, they're going to help us, and everything's going to end up being perfect on the other side. And that's not true. If you view counselors more as people who sit and listen to you, ask you questions, and help you think some things through, then you're going to have a better expectation of what you expect of counseling, as opposed to thinking that they're going to be the magic fix-all type of people. That's just one thing for you to consider. Here's the next thing that you need to know. There are certain things that counselors can't do. Here's the big one, especially if you're thinking about going to a counselor for your marriage. A counselor cannot help someone do something that they don't want to do. It's actually part of their code of ethics. So if you are putting all of your time and effort into trying to get your spouse to go to marriage counseling with you, when your spouse wants out of the marriage, when your spouse wants a divorce, if your spouse wants to separate, if your spouse is in love with someone else, and you're thinking, if I can just get them to go to counseling with me, then our counselor will fix the marriage. Here's the thing. If in that session, your counselor hears your spouse say that they don't want to fix the marriage, that they want out, ethically, your counselor, by the laws and the agreements that they are bound to, by their ethical standards, they cannot make your spouse do something they don't want to do. This becomes a problem in the mind of the counselor, because the counselor has to make a choice at the beginning of starting therapy with a couple. Who do they see as the client? This is a huge part of how we were trained as counselors in terms of, do I see the individual as a client? Do I see the marriage as the client? And it can start to get really sticky. Some of the best counselors, in fact, if they're seeing you as an individual, then they will actually refuse to see you and your spouse together, because that's a conflict of interest. When they see you as a person, then you are their client. You as an individual are their client. And to see someone else and see the marriage as the client, there could be two different outcomes that each client, so to say, is wanting, and it can cause, like I said, conflict of interest. So many counselors or therapists won't even do both. Sometimes they do, and things can get kind of sticky. This is where we start to see situations like many people, more people than I wish would ever say this to me, but they will come to me and they will say, I took my husband, I took my wife, we saw a counselor. The counselor told us that it sounds like we should just divorce. A lot of times this happens when they see the couple, but one spouse wants to save the marriage, the other spouse doesn't. Ethically, the counselor can't help this person wanting out of the marriage to change their mind in order to try and stay in the marriage. They can ask questions, they can do things that go around that, but ethically, they can't force them. No one can, even we can't at Marriage Helper, but they can't get them to do something they don't want to do. And a lot of times it's too much for therapists or counselors to try and do. It's too much for them to do in the situation that they're in, and the fact that they only see you 1 hour a week. A lot of times what clients ask their counselors to do, the counselors are not even able to do. With the time constraint that's on it, with the fact that you go back to real life after that 1 hour of counseling, there's so much that goes into that a lot of times the counselor just says, it might be best for you to separate or for you to divorce. And here's the thing. That's all your spouse who wants out of the marriage needs to hear. All they need to hear is from a professional saying, see, you can't make it. We should divorce. Our counselor told us clearly there's no hope for us. When in actuality, that's not true. There is still hope for you. It's just that the counseling setting wasn't going to be the best thing to move your marriage forward. That's another thing that you need to understand. Here's the third thing that you need to know. Counselors are humans, and they have their own biases, their own stigmas, and they aren't supposed to take this into the counseling room with them, but we're all human, and we do. We just do. It's just like doctors. I love my doctor. I have an amazing doctor. There are other people who would not like my doctor because my doctor's bias and stigma is he comes from a more holistic background. He's a medical professional. He's an MD, but he's also more of that functional medicine doctor where he's all about trying the natural ways before starting into medicine. There's other people who that's not their thing. Counselors are the same way. There's going to be biases that they have from their own life experiences, their own situations that they do take into the counseling room that affect the way that they counsel. It just happens. There was a woman recently that we had interaction with who was a counselor. And in her interaction actually with our founder, Dr. Joe Beam, she said to him, I believe everyone has a little bit of narcissism in them. When I hear that, I think this woman has had an experience in life that has shifted and changed the way that she sees the people around her in the world. And she takes that in to the counseling room with her. No, everyone does not have a little bit of narcissism in them. Narcissism, to be a narcissistic person, you need to be diagnosed by a licensed professional, which is not every LPC or MFT. Not all of them have the ability to diagnose things that are in the DSM, which is the manual that we use as counselors and therapists to actually see what behavioral and mental different things that are going on in someone, depression, anxiety, GAD, all of that kind of stuff, general anxiety disorder. It's all in the DSM. All I'm trying to say in that is not all of them have the ability to do that. And narcissistic personality disorder is actually in that manual. You have to meet certain criteria, and it's not the majority of people in the world that have that. It's a very small percent. So when you hear things like that from a counselor, automatically flags go up for me. Counselors and therapists have had their own issues in life. I was trained alongside someone who, in the middle of marriage and family therapy training, in the middle of our master's program, she had an affair and left her husband. How do you think she's going to be as a counselor? Unfortunately, most marriage and family therapy programs and most licensed professional counseling programs do not weed people out. I wish that they did, but as long as someone pays the money in order to get the degree, they can at least get the degree. Then they have to go through supervision and they have to pass a test, absolutely. But unfortunately, they're not weeded out as I believe that they should be. So keep all of that in mind as you're trying to choose a counselor. Here's another thing. When my husband and I first got married, we went to marriage counseling. We went separately, and we also went together as a couple. And the advice that this psychologist gave to my husband in one of our sessions was that he believed that we should watch porn together. That goes completely against the beliefs and values that me and my husband have. Stupid things that professionals can say. A lot of times the professionals, like I've already said, they say, get a divorce. Sometimes they say, maybe you made a mistake by marrying the person that you did. Sometimes they even say, let's do a controlled separation where I, as the counselor or licensed professional, will meet with the two of you. I'll watch how you do during the separation, and then we'll decide together whether or not you should get back together. Please avoid going to see a counselor that would do any of those things. Not all counselors are the same, and they're not all trained the same. This is a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. The counselors may not be able to help you, but they also may not be able to tell you that, or they just may not tell you that. I've had multiple counselors tell me. They've said, there was one person in particular that I'm thinking of right now where she said, I have a 99% success rate, which is amazing. A 99% success rate. I said, tell me what you do. She said, well, here's the thing. If my clients do every single thing that I tell them to, then 99% of them end up getting the results that I want them to have. Really watch whether or not the statistical backing behind the people that you're seeing, the experiences that they've had, question them. Another situation where I've met with counselors and I've asked them, I've said, what is the efficacy rate that you have with people who are going through an affair in their marriage, so to say? What kind of success do you have in working with couples that have experienced infidelity in their marriage? Most counselors tell me maybe 10 to 20% success. Even according to the AAMFT, which is the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapy that I referred to before, in their code of ethics, it includes several items that are very crucial for you to understand as far as how, specifically in this case, marriage and family therapists view the success of therapy. Not one item in the code of ethics, which you can find online, states or refers to focusing on helping the couple save their marriage as one of their tenets of success. In fact, in 2005, there was a report about the work of marriage and family therapists, and it says that these therapists were saying that we can say with confidence that fewer than half of the couples treated in therapy will move from a distressed state to a non-distressed state. That's less than half of people move from being distressed to non-distressed. It gets even worse. They concluded that how long the benefits last for couples who do come to therapy and get to being less distressed is uncertain. Here's what that means. Most therapy isn't helpful, and that is helpful, it is unknown how long that effect lasts. Why couples therapy is not effective also remains unclear in page 40 of that document from 2005. Pay close attention to the next part of what this AAMFT document says. It says, by and large, when researchers ask if couples therapy works, they are not asking if it reduces divorce, but if partners simply feel or function better in their relationships after they leave therapy than before they entered it. In short, they are not measuring whether or not couples are saving their marriages, but only if the person feels better. But feeling better can occur for the spouse who wants out of the marriage because it's a way of therapy to provide them a way out so that they can feel less guilt or even just a sense of justification. This is another reason why you need to understand the limitations of therapy. And part of the reason that therapy does have such strong limitations is because you're putting you and your spouse in a one-on-one setting. And it's very easy for a spouse who wants out of the marriage to get defensive when they feel like they're being ganged up on. Please take that into consideration as you're determining whether or not you decide to go to therapy. All of that being said, if you are wanting to choose a good counselor, there are good ones. And here's my recommendation for what you should do. Here's the first thing. Ask yourself, what is your end goal? Is your end goal to get to a place where you want to save your marriage? Counseling may not be the answer for you. The workshop that we do here at Marriage Helper has a 77% success rate. The reason it works is because it is different than counseling. That 77% success rate comes from an independent research study that was taken where they followed our couples that came through our workshop and followed them for 7 years after the workshop ended. And even 7 years after, 77% of those marriages, where 90% of them, one spouse wanted out of the marriage, still were together 7 years later. 77% success rate. It's amazing. It works because it's not counseling. A lot of times we think, well, my husband needs a counselor. He needs someone specifically to tell him, or my wife needs someone specifically to tell her the ways that she should change. I'm telling you, it's not going to work. It's going to make your spouse defensive, and it might even end up being the detrimental part of your marriage. It might end up destroying your marriage when you were hoping that it would save it. Counseling is great when you find a counselor who's willing to help you save the marriage, a counselor who has the same beliefs and values that you do about marriage, and a counselor who's open and honest with you about the experience that they've had and the ways that they can help you move forward. A counselor who's not going to recommend divorce, but you need to know this about your counselor before you ever step foot into their counseling session and sit on the couch with your spouse, because it could be the worst thing that you end up doing. I'm passionate about this because I've seen it happen way too many times. So here's what I recommend you do. Get recommendations from people that you know who have a good marriage. Don't take recommendations from people that you know who ended up getting divorced. Find someone who ended up having a great experience with a counselor. Their marriage ended up being saved from it, or at least improved dramatically from it, and go to that person. But even then, I suggest that you talk to the counselor first. Set up a 5 or 10 minute meeting. Don't tell them all about your problems. Don't turn it into a counseling session. Please be respectful of the counselors. But just ask them, what do you believe about marriage? When do you believe a couple should get divorced? Are you on board with helping me save my marriage even if my spouse wants out? What will the therapy session or counseling session look like? Ask those questions on the front end. And if you can't find a counselor that will answer those questions for you, then keep trying to find one until you do, because you want to know that you have chosen the right person before you ever set foot in their office. And the final part is you need to have peace about it. You need to be certain that you have chosen a person that you trust, that you believe is wise, and that you believe has the same beliefs and values about your marriage that you do. I, of course, highly recommend our coaches. We don't do counseling at Marriage Helper. We like to be able to do things a little bit differently. Our coaches would never recommend divorce. They are willing to work with you as an individual or work with you and your spouse as a couple. The unfortunate thing is sometimes you can't get your spouse to agree to go to counseling to begin with. That's fine. Our coaches have so much experience and expertise in working with you as an individual person who's trying to save your marriage, to give you real things, tactical, implementable strategies that you can start doing right now, even if your spouse wants out of the marriage. We would love to help you do that. And of course, our workshop. It's amazing. 90% of the people who come have a spouse who wants out of the marriage. 67% of the couples who come to our workshop have been affected by an affair. But that doesn't mean that you just have to be affected by an affair to come to our workshop. We deal with every type of situation, and we still have a 77% success rate. I understand that it's hard enough to try and get your spouse to go to counseling. How in the world are you going to get them to come to a 3-day workshop? And there's actually a lot of pros to coming to the 3-day workshop as opposed to trying to get your spouse to come to counseling. Number one is that it's only 3 days. It can be 3 days and done. And then your spouse doesn't have to worry about having to go every single week for 3 or 4 months or whatever that might be. Here's a pro for you to consider as well. We've had many counselors tell us, because we work closely with many counseling centers across the nation, and the counseling centers we partner with tell us that we're able to move couples forward 6 to 9 months in our 3 days. It would take that counselor 6 to 9 months to move a couple that far if they were just doing counseling. You get all of that in 3 days with us. Think about how much that would save you in your emotions, in your stress levels, and even in money. Counseling isn't always cheap. It would move you forward. And in 3 days, for you to have an experience that you walk out of and have learned so much, not just about your marriage, but about yourself, 100% worth it. It's absolutely priceless. We would love to have you be a part of our workshops. We would love to have you be a part of our coaching, and we would love to help you find a good counselor. We do have a couple of people that we do recommend, but overall, those are the strategies and the things that I would recommend to you if you're trying to choose a good counselor. Trust them, know that they have a similar beliefs and values, and have peace about what you're doing. And make sure that you know what your end goal is. Because counseling, just like anything else, isn't a magic bullet. Neither is anything that we do at Marriage Helper. Counseling has a place and it has a purpose, and the good counselors that are out there are amazing, but it might not be the answer to what you're looking for right now. If we can help you in anything, please contact us. You can find us at marriagehelper.com, or you can give our team a call at 866-903-0990. We would love to help you move forward in your marriage.